I'm Cass, a holistic practitioner and all-around weirdo. Join me as we explore the ultimate final frontier. Welcome to Cosmic Cowboy Roaming the Weird West. Saddle up, y'all. Hello, and welcome to Cosmic Cowboy Roaming the Weird West. I'm back, baby. I'm so excited. So a couple quick things. First and foremost, this episode was really fun to record because Allie and I haven't talked in about 6 years, like face to face. And so like it was really fun to just kind of pick up where we left off. Both of us have gotten a lot weirder, but also a lot more we found ourselves a lot more, I should say. So it was really cool to reconnect with Allie at this point in my life. I was in a different city. I was having lots of technical issues. I didn't know that I only had an hour worth of storage space on my phone. So there was like a good hour of the conversation that was missed. I also didn't pre-record an introduction, hence now. And so really didn't have anything prepared. Allie and I just sort of dove into it. So it hits the ground running real fast. So hang on. And then besides that, this episode is sort of like the little trumpets and fireworks of my rebranding / amalgamating my two brands into one. So previously, I had both Equus Animal Sports Therapy and Pivot Holistic Healing. One focused specifically on animals, one's focused mostly on humans. The reason for this brand separation was trying to niche down, like I've always heard you're supposed to niche down, and then also trying to, I guess, it was a little bit of a self-defense mechanism. A lot of my treatment styles veer very far into the woo, and I thought that I had to I was trying to remain credible in the eyes of people who may not be open to holistic healing. And in reality, like trying to divide those two aspects of my practice became very difficult to the point that like it almost became hard to practice my profession because I was trying to hide the too wooey stuff from people who weren't into the woo. And then, during treatment sessions, because like the sports therapy and the holistic healing are so meshed together in my practice, I would come back with certain aspects of treatment that, I wouldn't have any way to scientifically justify why I knew what I did about something. So a good example is oftentimes, if there was a person who had an animal that was very lethargic, very disinterested in life, just didn't want to do regular activities, but there was no real physical cause for it. Oftentimes there would be like full body tension, but that wasn't the cause of the emotional imbalance. The cause of the emotional imbalance was coming from the fact that the animal's owner was experiencing depression. And so for myself, talking about mental illness is not that unusual. I forget that not everybody's like that. And on top of that, not everybody necessarily even acknowledges that mental illness is a thing, especially with the older generations. And so I would maybe be doing a treatment session on an animal and then just out of nowhere ask the owner, are you experiencing depression? And it would really take a lot of people aback because, one, why am I asking? This is a session for their animal. Two, how does that even impact the animal? And so there was this weird like delineation between my two businesses where I could talk about some things in one and not in the other. And a lot of it was really coming down to not accepting how I practice and allowing that full integration. So that's a very long-winded way to say Equus Animal Sports Therapy has bit the dust, and now it's all Pivot Holistic Healing. And I'm very excited about that because that means I get to be really weird with a lot of things, and I get to be really out there in certain aspects of my practice without worrying that I'm going to be off-putting towards... Sorry, my dog's going nuts. There's a squirrel outside. I'm not having to worry about being off-putting to, say, the more academically inclined or the more scientific focused. That said, though, it also gives me a really good opportunity to, explain the more wooey side of things with the scientific side of things also. So it's just really allowing for a lot more integration, and also it's going to be a lot less mental stress to manage because I'm not going to have to manage two separate social media accounts. So that's great. It's all under one banner. So sort of in celebration, I've been planning this for a while. New website is up. There is now I don't want to call it a support group. That's not a community. There's an online community on Facebook. The link will be in the show notes here. And anyone's welcome to join. It's free. It's just going to be a place where I share resources. I'd like to build a community there. It's all free. It's all fun. Any new free courses or paid courses that I'm doing, that group will kind of have first dibs sort of thing. So yeah, join the group and check it out, and let's build a community. And then, yeah, this podcast is sort of the third little trumpet going for this celebration, this announcement that I've been so excited to do this for so long, and I finally got my shit together and did it. So it's here. And yeah, so gonna run a little intro here for Allie. So our guest today is Allie. Allie and I have been friends for about 6 years. We met in the SCA, which is the biggest nerd activity that I feel like one could possibly take part in. It's a medieval reenactment group. You've probably heard of them. Allie and I did that for a couple years together. We even vied for the crown together. We were the first same-sex fighting couple to vie for the crown in Avocal, and that was a pretty big momentous occasion for us. We were very stoked to stir the pot a little bit. And Allie is a self-described folk weirdo. I love it. I love it so much. They like swords, and like I said, Allie and I tried and failed to usurp the throne, but the kingdom is never safe from us. They're interested in folklore, mythology, traditional ways of knowing, and English folk magic. They're also interested in rapier fighting, which is similar to fencing, except that it's performed in a circular pattern. To be quite honest, I don't know a lot about it. I know it looks cool, it looks complex, and it's a little bit above my pay grade at this point in time. We do get into it. It's also called destreza. I don't know how to say it right. And we do kind of dive into it without any preambles. So it's really, from what I understand, it's fought on the basis of circular patterns. And so you might hear us mention about these patterns. If you look up destreza, Destreza, you might see some of these patterns. They're circular. They kind of look like star charts from astrology. And that's what we're talking about. So it's fighting with thin, pointy swords and dancing around in a circle a lot, and that's about the extent of my knowledge in it. So we do get into that in a bit. All right, so let's get into it. This is Allie, and we get into a lot of varied topics, so hang on.
My niece lives right on White Ave,
Okay.
so I had to locate her house by myself, get into her house by myself because she was volunteering at the Folk Fest. And
Okay.
yeah, it's been an adventure, but I made it. So
I am happy to hear this. That's good.
what's new with you? I love all your fencing stuff, rapier stuff. Super
Thanks.
cool.
Mostly fencing stuff, to be honest. I'm super hyper focused on fucking fencing right now.
Yeah.
But I'm enjoying it. I don't know. Yeah, just lots of gardening and fencing and walking the dogs because they take 9,000 hours a day to get
Yeah.
tired,
Yeah.
because that's what you get when you get sheepdogs like an
I know.
idiot
Yeah.
during the pandemic. I was like, this will be fine, I have loads of time, it's no problem. And then it's during the pandemic I had lots of time.
Yeah.
Slightly different situation now, but that's okay. They're very tolerant of being walked at 5:30 in the morning when I have time, so
Yeah.
they're good now. Although then they wake you up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And they're like, fucking time to go. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I've been good. It's I don't know, it's been like 6 years. How's it been going? I don't
I
know.
know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like during the pandemic, just basically shut down and did nothing for like 2.5 years, except like reading and feeling sorry for myself, basically. Um, and then just like now that that's kind of done, just trying to do as much as humanly possible,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
make up for lost time, kind of
yeah.
thing. So, yeah, how
Yeah.
have you've had many things happen in your life? How is
Fuck,
life with
man,
you?
it's like I'm simultaneously an entirely different person since we last actually talked, and like the same person, and so it's like,
Mood
yeah.
100%. Yeah, mood for real. Yeah, I'm literally in a new aspect of my personhood, but
Yeah,
also the same bullshit.
yeah, yeah. No, so it's been yeah, it's been a fucking journey. Yeah, business definitely slowed down. So, not having a car is kind of imperative to go work on horses. So
Yeah.
that changed, and now I'm just working a normie job, and it's a good job, but I'm like, after 2 months of it, I'm like, okay, I'm bored. Like, let's do something else. I'm bored. And like,
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that. I feel that.
yeah, just got like super entrenched into like the weird stuff. It's so funny because like when I started the animal sport therapy certification, like I was like, I just want to massage horses. And then during the interview, the instructor's like, okay, you have to do, these holistic healing techniques. You have to try them even if you don't believe in them. And I'm like, well, like, I guess I'll try them. Like, I'm
I
not,
suppose.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
I don't believe in this shit. Like, it's not gonna work. And then like it kept working better than anything else on like really severely traumatized horses. And I was like, okay, what the fuck? Like, why is this working? And
Yeah.
then yeah, like deep dove into like that. Found this book called The Holographic Universe, which is basically like a kind of like a catch-all theory as to why like the paranormal works, holistic healing works, like the power of positive thinking, like all of the hippie shit, like why it works. And basically it's just because it works because you create your reality to make it work. Like that's
Almost like
essentially
chaos
the
magic. That's great. Like
yes,
we have
yes,
there's a modality of that in Magic, or I guess I'm gonna say an operating system,
yeah,
which is like kind of a whatever. But like there's an operating system called chaos magic, that kind of emerged in that framework in the 1970s. That sort of says that too,
yeah,
like your will is paramount, so you
yeah,
can will things into kind of being in a way, right? Like it's the intention, and then that kind of creates stuff.
yeah.
So I think it's the same sort of underpinning there,
Hmm.
a little bit. So that's quite cool.
Yeah, no, it's like it's I highly recommend the book. I lent it to a friend. Once she's done with it, I'll lend it to you too.
Rad.
Um, but yeah, no, like, and initially, like, with like small things, I was like, okay, yeah, I can see this, like, like in terms of like willing things into existence. Um, just in terms of like, I like it's kind of I almost kind of joke that it's like this cosmic joke because like the shit that I like manifest, like I get it. So like I wanted a barn job, I got it, but then like it was not a good time, and then like, and
There's
then
like
like
that. There's that like be careful what you wish for
yeah,
aspect
yeah, yeah, yeah,
always,
yeah,
right? It's like,
yeah,
okay, you asked for this, but what you meant was this.
yeah,
How did you phrase that?
yeah.
Right?
Well, and
Like,
it's
yeah,
almost like good practice because it's like, okay, yeah, here you go, here's the thing you wanted, and then like you get it and it's like, okay, that's not what I wanted, but I know now that I can get what I want. And
totally.
so now let's reevaluate and like make that framework. And it's been interesting because like with the car, for instance, so like getting that new car, like leasing that new car, like at the start of the summer I was like, okay, we need a new car, like universe, car, any reliable, like I said it like very open. It was like a car that's reliable, safe to drive, not going to cost us too much, that won't need to be in the mechanic every 2 months. The highest and best good for me car. And yeah, then it turned out even better than we could possibly have imagined because like
Sweet.
when we went and tried to lease a Honda. Like it was going to be like $380 biweekly, like no cool features, nothing.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then we got rejected for that, and we're like, wow, like everything sucks, like this isn't going to work. And then I was like, well, let's just go like test drive a Corolla Cross, we'll just go see because it's a lot cheaper. And we get there, and I'm like, well, I already drove the CRV, like let's drive the RAV4 just to see. And then we get back to the office, and the lady's like, oh, okay, so what's your budget? So we give her our budget, and she's like, oh, we can get you into a RAV4 for that. And I'm like, excuse me, like I thought this was going to be the same price.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like $100 below our budget, like cool features. It's just insane. And I'm like knock on wood, it's not here yet. So we'll see how it goes on September, but it's coming, it's coming.
Nice.
And like yeah, when we got out, it was a very like liminal experience because we walked from the dealership to Denny's, and we had to walk through like this industrial area that was like very liminal. And like the entire walk, I was like saying to my partner, I'm like, this kind of feels magical. Like it just feels weird. And so while we're walking, we find this huge berry of choke cherry or bush of choke cherries. So we're like snacking on choke cherries while we're meandering along because we were both starving hungry. We'd been in the dealership for 5 hours. And
Oy.
then we're walking, and then we just come across like this big patch of like really well kept grass. Like normally in the industrial area, it's all weedy and gross. And I was like, oh, like this is nice, like it's pretty grass. So we're walking through it, and then we come across like a fairy ring, and of course my dumb ass is like, I'm gonna walk through it. And so
Don't
like,
walk through the Rule 1. Don't do it.
I know. I think that led to something that happened the other day, but there was like a little entrance on it, so I like walked through the entrance. And then there was like
Yeah,
a whole.
classic. There was an entrance.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, and then there was a whole ton of dragonflies in this, but like, there's no other grass anywhere else, and they're just like these huge, massive dragonflies. I'm like, how are these like surviving here? Because this is the only patch of grass for who knows how far. And yeah, so then we like meandered through and back into like super liminal space, and then like went and had like an adventure for the rest of the day, and it was just like what it like I call it like mundanely magical. Like it's like there's
I love
nothing
that. Yeah.
inherently magical about
Yeah.
it, but it just feels a little funky. And
Totally.
yeah, so it was a cool experience. And yeah, now the car's coming in September, and like yeah, it's been interesting for sure. So I don't know, like with your folk magic, you said that it's more like protection stuff, right? Like it's not really like chaos magic where you're like manifesting things, right?
It depends on the person.
Mm.
It depends on your sort of like interpretation of it. Like for me, I kind of take two different aspects and kind of smush them together. Like traditionally speaking,
Yeah.
folk magic has no chaos elements.
Okay.
Folk magic is depressingly practical. It's
Yeah.
like things have attributes. You stack the attributes together in a specific way. Hey presto, you're
Yeah.
gonna get a thing. There's a lot of sympathetic magic. There's a lot of like, this looks like a foot and my foot's broken. So if I stick this foot thing on my foot, like, it's very sort of like there's a harmony and an order to things, and
Yeah.
you have to tap into that. And human beings are not magical. Human beings can use magic
Mm.
like you use a hammer. It's like a technology or a tool,
Yeah.
but we are not inherently magical in nature.
Mm.
So you have to sort of plug into like a power main to get things to happen for you, whether that's summoning a demon or whether that's talking to your, holy angel or whatever, your genius or whatever. But it's very hierarchical and it's very ordered. For myself, I tend to take a little bit more of a chaos magic-y flair, which I think most modern magic users do. Whereas there's much
I
more
feel
of
like if
like
you
a
have ADHD, you're also inclined to just like pull from all these other
just fucking
practices.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm already doing magic. Why don't I just go do this magic over here and this one and this one and this one?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. It's like that feels like a lot of work in preparation. Like 3 days of prep for this magic circle. Fuck that. I ain't got time. What I'm gonna do is burn some hair and get some blood and just like fucking go ham and hope for the best. But like, yeah, like I do take more of a chaos magic kind of bent to it, in that I think, how to say this, like I think that your will is very important, and
Yeah.
I think that your will can be used to adapt things to the circumstances that you have. So it's like if you're baking a cake, right? Yes, there's a recipe, and you should, follow the recipe or whatever, but there's people who are like anal retentatively, like, it says 375 for exactly 60 minutes, and I have to use this brand of flour, and like
Yeah.
all this stuff. And then there's people who are like, yeah, but I've baked so many cakes, like I understand the theory of cake,
Yeah.
so like I can adapt this cake
Yeah.
and it will still be good. Like I know what to do. So like I kind of tend to go that way. I think you can go too far. I think you can be like, I'm baking a cake and what I have is ham, beans, and a
Sorry,
shoe. I'm
one
gonna
one
just shove
second.
them.
Do you mind keeping that off for now? It's just super loud. Thank you. Sorry, I'm like at my niece's place and she's trying to get cozy and get all snuggled up because she's
It's okay, niece,
gonna
get
sleep.
cozy. Don't mind me.
No, she just turned the fan on, and I'm like, I can hear that with my headphones on. It's probably coming through so loud on this recording that, like, not a fan. Anyway,
But
sorry.
yeah, like
Cakes.
yeah, you can go too far into Chaos Town, where it's
Yeah.
like, you have no idea, like your intention is all over the place, and you're just feeling feelings, and you're just blah, and
Yeah.
you're just no longer giving yourself any form whatsoever. It's just, um, and I think that that is going to limit your effectiveness.
Mm.
Um, but like, yeah, like I think that there's a middle ground. I'm always about middle ground. I'm like liminality, middle ground, hedges, middle, balance. Like there is a middle to be found there, between being so ridiculously um focused on like the exact precise everything, and just kind of like screaming into the void, basically. um which is also very cathartic, and sometimes things scream back at you, and then you learn something interesting, right? Like if you're screaming into the void and something screams back, you go, oh, there was something there in that void. Okay, I'm gonna learn how to communicate with that better in future. But yeah, so that was like a really weird and long-winded way of saying, like, yeah, kind of.
No, I really like that aspect of liminality because, like, that's something I've been kind of thinking about lately for myself. Like, I don't, anything that feels too much like religion, I get very squeamish about. So, like, I
I get
have
it.
a paganism for beginners book, and there's like magic stuff in there and whatnot. And the book itself is really great. Um, but yeah, when someone like gives me too many instructions, I'm like, how do you know this? Where's this coming from? What do you do? Like, what's your sources? Like, and which
I
at the
get it.
like it's like this weird balance. Like that's why like I don't vibe with Wicca because they just like pull
I get it.
shit out of the thin air, and then they're like, this is historically accurate, and it's like, but is it though? Like,
Yeah, you can kind of, especially Wicca, you're like, is Gerald Gardner historical?
yeah. Well, and it was crazy too. Like
And
when,
like he was
oh, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, go.
Mm,
Oh, he was drawing on a tradition.
yeah,
Obviously, he was drawing on what other secret and occult societies had done, and they too were then drawing on magical traditions in some cases that are thousands of years old. And we know this because we have texts. We have grimoires. We have little bits and pieces. But I mean, over thousands of years, these things are reinterpreted and reused. And oh, I saw this cool thing on a piece of paper, so I think it's magical. So I'm just gonna like copy it down on another
yeah,
piece of paper. It's magic. Um, but it is hard, especially if you have underlying religious trauma, which I do for sure. I don't know about you, but like if there is an underlying religious trauma there, um, it can be very hard to kind of look at magic, which is inherently religious. I mean, magic emerged, as we know it, from a Christian cosmological worldview. Certainly folk magic did. It is almost impossible to separate folk magic fully from Christianity. Like you can plug into different power mains if you want to. Like you can talk to different people, you can do things in a different way. You can call on Odin instead of, Michael or whatever. But like the framework, the cosmology, yeah, the
Yeah.
cosmology that you're tapping into is very Christian.
Mm.
And even if you go older than that, like there's still sort of an understanding of cosmic hierarchy that can feel really religious. And I think that comes through in a lot of magical traditions. It's very prescriptive. It's very like, and then we do the four corners, and then we do the, and then the.
Yeah.
And if that does not vibe with you, like if ritual does not vibe with you, fair enough,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah. I think it's going to be something I'm going to have to come back to. And folk magic has been something that, like, I've been watching you do it for so long, and I'm like, okay, you know what? If Allie can, are you going by Allie now, or is it Allie, or have you changed your name, or no?
Allie's still good.
Okay.
Allie's always good.
Okay.
It's like
Um.
it's. I was like, okay, whatever name like has to shorten to Allie because it's just fucking easier that way. Like, it's just
Fair
easier.
enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, like knowing what I do about your religious background and like watching you do folk magic, I'm like, all right, if Allie can vibe with this, like I feel like I probably can, because you grew up like Catholic, right?
Oh fuck yeah. I
Okay,
mean, when we were like really hanging out, like
you were
I
still
was
Catholic.
deep into Catholic. I was
Yeah.
so Catholic. Like I was deep into Catholic hell. Like just absolute shame misery spiral. Like I was so deep into, I was like in trad Catholic town at the time. I was like, no, we veil to go into church, and I can't be
Oh
in a room
wow.
alone with a man who's not my husband, and like men aren't allowed to touch me and things like that. Like I
I
was
didn't
like
know. I
deep
didn't know
into
you
trad
were
Catholic.
like. I knew you were Catholic, and I remember like when we were in the SCA, you'd said like wanting to be an inspiration for someone, but like I thought it was just like a personal thing, like about your husband, that you didn't want to be an inspiration to another man because that was like in your mind, like crossing that. I didn't realize like that was stemming from like your religion. Like I didn't know you
Yeah,
were
like it
that
wasn't anything that,
Catholic.
yeah, like it wasn't anything that my spouse even asked for. Like it, because if it was, I would have left him. That would have been it for me. It's like fuck you. You don't get to tell me what to do.
You can't tell me what to do, but this
But
church over
like,
here, that's all right.
yeah, but I was so desperate to have rules
Mm.
um that I felt that I could rely on, and some stability of something. I was just so desperate for stability at that time that I just went like for the ruliest rules. I was like, no, these are the normal rules for normal Catholics. I need more rules than that, like it's that academic approach to everything where you're like, but what are the ruliest
Yeah.
rules? um right, like, and it wasn't even anything that I don't even really think that I like believed in it at the time, like I had big hesitations about it, obviously, um which like anybody would have known from talking to me, right? It was like
Well, yeah, I
the
remember
fact that
like
they vilify.
when you were telling me about it, like you were disparaging is not quite the right word, but like almost disparaging of it. And so I thought you were like, raised Catholic, still go to church because that's what, like that's the tradition, but like not in it
Yeah,
kind of thing. Um so yeah, like I always figured you were like on the cusp of leaving. You just hadn't because like it's like family or something's holding you there. Like
yeah, and that was kind of true at the time, but I think it was this holding on because I needed some underpinning in my life, right? I was
mm.
so desperate for something to be true and really infallibly true, that I was terrified to leave it. And I was terrified to acknowledge to myself that it wasn't true.
Do you find like has
So
magic
like
taken that same role for you? Like is it
it's I think magic is much more flexible, but I think I that's an interesting question. Uh um I'm much more animist now. I sort of look more at the universe as a whole, as an ordered whole, and things that are human made don't need to be that true.
Yeah.
It's okay for the universe to be functioning and for us to not fully understand everything about it. And it's the release of the need for control a little bit.
Mm.
Um,
That's interesting
and
because I
that
was
has
gonna
brought me
say
some peace.
like in the free course that I taught, and then just for myself, like I find that, and just reading about it, like from a psychological standpoint, ritual really gives that sense of control in like the uncontrollable. Like you're dealing with uncontrolled forces, and
Mm-hmm.
it gives you like some sort of sense of like getting to say something, and it's less so, I find, that like the ritual itself is generating the effects, rather the sense of feeling in control and not spiraling out into like, holy crap, I can't control anything in my life.
100%. Yeah.
Like it sort of gives you that little bit of grounding where you can like be like, okay, you know what, like my life is going to shit, so I'm gonna go like burn some incense, light a candle, do this thing, and feel better about it, and then like
It's
feel
this
better able to
grounding.
cope
Yeah.
with the situation
Yeah.
that's spiraling out of control. Which has been
Yeah.
really interesting. Like I was watching something the other day on how basically psychology is magic. Like I know people would get mad about that, but
Mm.
like because
No, no,
so
no,
much
for
of it
real.
is
For real.
like there's
Yeah.
not a lot of like fundamental proof that XYZ equals this disorder. Like we're even seeing it now with like Gabor Mate's new research where he's saying like mental illness isn't like these genes or this specific brain chemical or like anything physical like that in that sense. It's just a packet of genes that codes for sensitivity. So the more sensitive an individual is, the more like predisposed they are to mental illness. And because most
Interesting.
people nowadays have those genes, like they're more predisposed towards further and further mental illness. And then you factor in
Interesting.
like trauma, say for like BPD, like borderline personality, like there's like that is
Mm-hmm.
purely trauma born. Like there is,
100%. Yeah.
it's not a genetic condition. It's that you suffered from so much trauma that your brain and your personality just are like like they can't function.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like
Um,
I feel like the video was talking about how like psychology in Western society, like going for traditional therapy and stuff like that really is the ritual of like sitting with the witch doctor and like talking what's going on, and then them like providing you the ritualistic steps, i.e. coping mechanisms, to overcome that mental illness. And he's like, we see like the same if not better effects in societies that have um like some sort of witchcraft element to it, where they can go to the witch doctor, the shaman, the medicine person, whatever, and get those cures. So he's talking about like exorcisms and how successful they are at curing depression. And it's not that the exorcism itself works; it's that the person is living in a cultural context where they grew up knowing about exorcisms, and like that being such a uh, like foundational aspect to their culture, that because they believe in it, it works. Whereas now with like psychology, like you have a whole generation that doesn't believe in psychology, and now a generation that does. And so for the older generation, it might not necessarily work that well, but like for the younger generation, it's working better because they're growing up with that cultural context of it.
of it's like, yeah, I go to the therapist, I feel
Mm-hmm.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you make there, that there's that sort of cultural modality. There has to be that role in a culture.
Yeah.
There has to be.
Yeah.
There has to be the person, even, we don't even have to go outside of our own cultural context for that, right? I mean, confession,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
for Catholics, right? Like the fact that you can go and unburden yourself to somebody and say, I did this stuff. I'm grappling with this stuff. I'm feeling really awful about this stuff. And they say, great, 3 paternosters, 5 Ave Marias, do the
Yeah.
rosary 2 times, and you're good to go, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you can go to someone who is not really in your cultural space, but is, like, because a priest, you're not hanging out with your priest. They're not your buddy.
Mm-hmm.
You're not hanging out with your local wise woman necessarily. They're not your friend.
Yeah.
So they're sort of separate from your life. Same with your therapist. Like you're not chilling out with them, at the bar. You really shouldn't
Yeah.
be. But you can, weird things happen. But like, you go to somebody who's just outside of your life, you can completely unburden to that person. They give you some way for you to fix whatever's
Yeah.
going on, and then you can return to your life, right? They occupy this border space, between inside the community and outside of the community. It's that liminality space again, right? That's that sort of in between hedge space. And I think therapists and psychologists are very much that.
Yeah.
Um, in our modern capitalist society, it's something that we understand really well. I go to this person, I pay them,
Yeah.
because everything there has to be.
There has
We
to
have
be
an obsession with
transactions.
with exchange. Yeah, there has to be payment, because otherwise they have something on me.
Yeah.
So like there has to be this exchange. We go to them, we pay them, they fix us, and then we can kind of go back to our lives unburdened, right?
Mhm.
Whether or not that's like the best and most healthy cultural option that we could be using, like,
Yeah.
we're not sure, but it is something that our culture understands. Like, it is
Yeah.
something that kind of works for us. So
I mean, I guess in traditional societies too, my first thought is like for like traditional like indigenous elders, like you still gift them, for their time, but it's like
it's
that
an
is my one,
acknowledgement.
yeah, like that is kind
Yeah.
of one of my main hangups with psychology is like I said when I commented on your post there is that like because it's so like time limited and limited by finances too.
Yes.
Like you can be opened up to something big that you're like trying to process, and then they're like, "Oh, that's time," and like
Yeah.
good luck till next week, figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Like,
that, fuck me. Because I did 2 sessions in short order. I don't remember if that was last week or the week before. Time is an amorphous blob to me right now. I have no idea what the fuck
agreed.
day it is. I'm like, where am I? But I did two sessions, and like it was like a Tuesday and then like a Friday. And it was like, that was tough. That was raw, because I just wasn't prepared for it. Like session 1 on Tuesday is like some
Mhm.
framework, and then Friday we're like getting into it, and then it's
Mm.
like, okay, yeah, so you're out of town and I'm out of town, so like we'll see you in 2 weeks. And I'm like, cool. I'll just die. It's fine. That's
Yeah.
cool. I'll just die. Don't worry about it. That's all right. Now we've just gone into this like super serious shit, and then it's like, well, I'm away. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Like just forget about your problems for
Thank you
2 weeks.
so much.
I do
Yeah, that's
wonder.
fine. I'll just.
Like I do wonder that like because like in a traditional society, like they like the person in that spiritual role, they deal with that problem till that problem's dealt with. Like it's not like a like okay,
Mm,
they might take breaks here and there. Like I'm not from a traditional society, so I don't know. But like when I was in school, like we had watched videos about oh I can't remember what group it is. They're in Kenya and they're one of the last few like traditional societies in Africa. And my teacher had gone and lived with them for months, and so she had recorded when they did this exorcism with this person, and it was like a 2-day event. Like it was like huge. The whole village was involved.
yeah.
Um,
Wow.
and like not there wasn't someone saying, okay, well you traded me your basket of corn or something, that only gets you 2 hours, and then like, we got to stop and like,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
by
It's
the
like,
way, I'm gonna go visit the next
that's fine.
village, and like,
Yeah.
like that's not a thing. It's like, okay, this is dealt with till it's dealt with, kind of thing. And I
Mm.
do wonder, like the way that we just cut things off right in the middle of healing. Like it would be like a surgeon like doing half your surgery and then being like, "Okay, come back in 2 weeks."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I
And that's
really wonder
very
how
much, I mean,
damaging that is.
it can be. I know it can be. I mean, I have tried therapy before, like not since my early 20s, so it's
Yeah,
been quite a long time. But very much that was the experience that I had, is that it was like a tooth extraction, where they just leave the nerve raw,
yeah,
right? And they're pulling this tooth out, and that's good because it's a rotten tooth. That's great. But like, you just leave the socket,
yeah.
and then
Especially
there's
eye
this kind
socket.
of like, oh, right. And it's like, okay, well, you only, your student insurance only paid for 6 sections, so
Yeah,
okay, like, I hope you're healed now. And it's like, ooh, very much not.
yeah,
Very much not. You have actually just opened up something that now can get infected, that
yeah,
can travel to other parts of the body, I'm doing that sympathetic Magick thing again now, where
Yeah,
it's like everything
yeah.
is a microcosm for everything else.
I mean, but
But
it
like,
legit
yeah,
is like when you get into
yeah,
like acupressure, for instance, like the going with the tooth
yeah,
thing, like that nerve is connected to so many different other muscles in your body. So like if you're storing like say like sexual trauma, for instance, sexual trauma will often take place, will like often be physically stored within the hips and the pelvis and like the root
yeah,
chakra kind of thing. So if you are opening up to this that would be really interesting to know, like people who are going through, say, therapy for sexual trauma, what's going on in their body and like the pelvis and the hips and like their reproductive system. Like I'd be really curious to know how that would work. And like just going off of that, like one thing that I've often seen is like people in my life who've had very severe sexual trauma, like they're the ones that end up developing like endometriosis and PCOS and stuff like that. And
interesting.
and I mean that's correlation, that's not causation by any means, but like I've just noticed that that is a very common a common link in my life.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Like, there's certainly I've been doing some reading over the last few weeks, and a lot of people who have had sexual assault trauma and things like that really seem to struggle with, like, this is more with movement, but really seem to struggle with like sort of connectedness to their lower body, and they struggle with things like moving their hips, and they struggle with, like, there does seem to be that inherent, like, sort of resistant disconnectedness from certain
Hmm.
parts of their body. um so like that does seem to, be a thing that I think is that holistic
Yeah.
idea, right, where it's like you can be a balloon tethered to your body and sort of floating around here, and function perfectly well, and that happens, like, it's not a bad thing to be a bit of a space cadet. um but like bringing someone back in to their body and sort of like getting them to embody themselves fully, especially after trauma, is like fucking difficult. Like,
It
that's
is.
hard, and you can't therapize that. Like,
No.
it's not that's not gonna fully deal that's gonna deal with the balloon on a string issue. Like, that's gonna deal with, like, okay, you and your brain, and maybe we're gonna work on some coping mechanisms and stuff like that. But if it's like, I can't move my hips properly, I don't know how to mobilize my lower body, please help me. A therapist is not going to be there, like, physiotherapying you,
Yeah.
right? They're not going to be like, okay, cool, let's gently, in a trauma informed manner, in a quiet place where you feel fully safe and you're fully clothed, and let's work through opening up this hip. Let's work through, making sure that your glutes are engaging,
Hmm.
things like the therapist is not going to do that shit for you.
No.
Like,
No. Although that would be
um,
cool to see like a multimodality approach. I mean, like you can definitely do it on your own. Um,
mhm,
but yeah, like when I was going for cranial sacral therapy and Reiki, that was really
mm,
interesting because like
interesting.
they were working with like the energetic body more so. I mean, cranial sacral therapy, they do work with a physical body too. Like that's highly
Mhm.
recommended if you've never gone for cranial sacral therapy because it really addresses like the emotional roots within the body.
Interesting.
And like they were working on, oh, I can't remember. It was on my hips, I know that, and on my stomach as well. And like I don't really have stomach issues, like nothing that's like come up frequently, but I've had people say like and even doctors like like there's something that's here that you might want to like look at addressing. It's not like showing symptoms, but like you might want to look at addressing it. And like while they were working on it, like they were coming up with like feelings of guilt and like all these like very complex feelings that were sort of stored in the lower half of my body. And then when I
Interesting.
got up off the table, like I could walk better. Like I have very limited hip mobility to some extent, just from like getting hit by a car and like a couple other things. And
Right.
once that was, addressed and like the flow, because like what cranial sacral therapy does is it like addresses the flow of the synovial fluid in your spine. So
Mm,
it's like a pulsing flow up and down your spine, and it's that pulse starts when you're born because it's the act of being pushed out of the womb that starts that rhythm. So if you're born by C-section, you don't have that rhythm properly. Um, And so they were addressing that because it was basically like flowing down to the one lady found. I think it was like just like the first lumbar vertebrae. It was flowing down to that fine, and then it was like really sludgy flow to the rest of my body. And so she was adjusting that. And when I got off the table, like I could actually move my hips and like move my legs better. I mean, granted, it lasted until I drove home and then like sat for hours, but like
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it definitely like it felt better though. Like I wasn't having like the low back pain and stuff, but like a lot of what she was dealing with was like guilt and like um sexual trauma to some extent. And then it was so funny. Like this was last year, and I had grown a bunch of cucumbers, and I'd stored them in a bag to pickle. And a whole ton of stuff happened in my life, and I forgot about them in the bag, and they went
We
bad.
all do it. We all do
Oh
it. No
no, I have
shame.
like trauma surrounding these 2B pickles. Like every time I would open the fridge and see the bag, I would just start crying, and like I
Oh
felt so bad
no.
and so guilty that I wasted my cucumbers. And so she was working on my body, and she's like, "Okay, this is really weird." She's like, "I'm getting guilt related to cucumbers," and I was like, "What?" And she's like, Cass, like it was kind of joking. She's like, Cass, have you been using cucumbers inappropriately? I was like, no, like what are you talking about? And she's like, okay, it's either cucumbers or pickles. I'm not sure which. And I'm like, oh my god, like it's the cucumbers in my fridge. And she's like, okay, so we need to let the cucumber guilt
Let
go.
the cucumbers go. Release the cucumber.
Yeah. So like I had to go home, and she's like, okay, like we'll do like a little ritual for your cucumbers. We'll like light a
Oh
candle
my
and like throw them out. And so like I had to, and I was like bawling the entire time. But like once it was done, like kind of my stomach area just felt so much better. But it was like it's absurd. Like it's so ridiculous. But like you said, like like that physical aspect of like feeling the flow of the cranial sacral rhythm, like that's what she was picking up on. She wasn't picking up on, stomach issues or me expressing guilt about vegetables or anything like that. Like she was picking up on like the cranial sacral rhythm, and then intuitively finding out about my cucumber guilt. And like like a therapist would never pick that up. You wouldn't have like any physical
no.
adjustment. Like
Fuck. Fuck. No, you're not gonna go to like, whatever our psych and then be like, listen, what I'm really feeling from you is vegetable based.
vegetable
Sort of
based
vegetable
trauma.
based hang up here that I really feel like we should unpick in our session today. I mean, I would pay good money for that. It's like, let's go. Can we cucumbers first, then let's deal with the carrots, all right? Like we'll just walk through.
Just a whole garden of trauma here.
Yeah, fuck. Yeah. Squash is not till next month. I'm not prepared for squash.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, so but like you said, like, you wouldn't have like even if you had a physiotherapist in that session, physiotherapist, psychotherapist, whatever, together, you wouldn't have someone picking up on that, like, because it was such a minor physical expression, like it wasn't actually a stomach
Yeah.
issue. It was in the craniosacral rhythm being stopped in that area kind of thing. And then, we did deal with
Interesting.
lower issues like a little bit with sexual trauma, but I mean that's something that you have to deal with over time. That's not as easy to release as cucumber guilt.
Yeah, no, it's I think that there is really something to be said for, you know, it's difficult, right? Because everything we're living in a very machine based, very solution based system, right? It's like we want to zone in on the point of issue, quickly deal with that, and then get people back out on the work floor.
Yeah.
I'm a Marxist historian, okay, so everything's class based, and I apologize for that.
No, that's fine. It's
You
all
know
good.
this about me. I'm sorry. This is just what it is. That has not changed.
It's
Um,
all good.
but like it's this idea where it's like, all right, this cog isn't working, so let's fricking pull that out, put a new one in. We should be good to go, right? But like
Yeah.
we're not that.
Yeah. We're
We're
not
not
AI
that. You
yet.
can't just go, yeah, no. And I mean, like, sign me up for a mech suit. Let's go, baby. But like, um, it's in the meantime, um, it's I think it's more helpful to look at how we inhabit ourselves and how things that are spiritual and psychological can really, really get in the way of that. Because we just remove ourselves, I think, from certain parts of our body and parts of our experience. We put up all these little walls for ourselves where it's like so unconscious. Um, well, I don't use my body that way because that sort of, for some reason, my mind self has decided that's vulnerable or scary or will open me up to commentary or touching, or something like that. We just wall ourselves.
Mhm.
um and psychology kind of deals with that, but it's not as a whole person. And I'm hoping that with time, like as psychology develops, because it's a very new
Oh yeah.
thing. Like
Yeah.
psychology as its own little corner of medicine. Is I mean, it's in its absolute infancy. So I'm hoping that as it develops further, we do get more of an understanding of this like whole creature
I think we're definitely on our
aspect.
way with like Gabor Mate and like people like
Mhm.
him. Like it's very much. I don't know if he's got a couple documentaries out on like psychedelic therapy to treat drug addiction, and like
Oh,
holy
weird.
moly, like
Interesting.
the like the sessions are filmed, and like just the deep trauma, because it really, like, I don't know how familiar you are with psychedelics, but essentially like it's
Not at all. Look how fucking square I am. I mean, Jesus Christ. I've never even used weed, my dude.
oh my god, I
Like,
love you. I
not
love you. You're so
I
precious.
not out of like still so precious, still precious. Um, but like not out of like a lack of interest or will, but just genuinely because I'm such a control psycho
Mm,
that like I need someone to like hold my hand and be like, this is how you do this.
yeah,
This is the appropriate. I'm not like a solo experimenter because I'm
yeah.
chicken shit. Because I'll like take acid and then just like run into the woods and never come back.
Is that such a bad
Like
thing
I'm now
though?
free of
Like
my physical self. Ah!
that's so funny. Yeah, no, with psychedelic therapy though, essentially what they do is it
Hmm.
rewires neural pathways. So when you have a trauma, it's
Interesting.
basically like a really well worn track. Like your brain will keep going through that same track because that's the most worn track. So like sexual trauma is just the easiest example to use. But say, you disassociate as soon as things start to get sexual, based on like that was the traumatic response you had, like say during a rape or something. And then that becomes the most well-worn path that like every time you initiate sexual contact with someone, you just disassociate. And so
Right.
that's like the most well-worn path. So that's where your brain's going to go to. And then with psychedelic therapy, you're actually able to rewire and create new neural pathways around that trauma. And so like for drug addiction, for instance, like the reason people are using drugs is to escape that well-worn neural pathway so that they can either
Totally.
numb away from it while their brain is processing through that and just like forget about it, or like just push through that like trauma point within that neural pathway. And so with psychedelic therapy, it's rewiring your brain essentially. So when you do like the actual like talk therapy while on psychedelics, you're able to really get into the root of like, why is this happening? What is that trauma that like oftentimes people will just like put up like memory blocks around? Like, I've worked with some clients,
Totally.
not on psychedelics, but I worked with some clients where like, it comes up that like, okay, at age 8 and 18 or 8 and 11, say, you experience shame, embarrassment, and guilt. And I've had clients be like, oh, I had a perfect childhood, nothing happened, blah, blah, blah. And then like when they actually sit with it and like think about it and finally like get into the meat of it and like realize like, oh yeah, like this happened, or like, my parent was abusive in this way, or like usually more like emotional abuse, I find, is like we block it out but we don't even realize it was traumatic because like it's not as such a clear cut like someone hit me. It's, oh, someone made an
Yeah.
offhand comment that hurt, and like I should just tough it out and get through it. Like that didn't matter. When in reality, like that one offhand comment from someone that you trust entirely is like absolutely devastating. If it was to come from like a friend or just a kid at school, it wouldn't be nearly as traumatic as it is from, that parental figure that you trust with literally your life. Like, and so
Totally. Yeah.
like being able to break down as to like those small little things and like really get into it, because like those mental blocks are removed under psychedelics, and like actually be able to process out why that's happening, and then from there sort of work through proper responses and like how you'd want to be treated, and like actually releasing those. Like getting into it is one thing, but like learning how to actually release it and essentially like like it's like you said with the operating system thing, it's essentially like reprogramming the computer. Like you're like, okay,
Mm.
like you experience overwhelming shame when you experience rejection. So now we're going to like release that rejection. And I mean, you can do that with like belief or patterning too. Like it's not solely that psychedelics can do it. It's just psychedelics are like like you said, take the cog out, put the new cog in. Psychedelics are like the fastest way to do that.
Interesting.
And it's very interesting like watching it in a therapeutic context, and especially like Gabor Mate, because like he's, I don't know how much you've like read up on him, but he's like gone through some shit. My god, that man, he's an absolute gem. And so like watching him in this documentary, like knowing what he's gone through and seeing him be able to like hold space for people to process this stuff out, like it's just, it's a very profound documentary. Like I have high hopes for the future of psychology because of this man. Like, and like people who are following
Interesting.
in his footsteps. Like it's phenomenal to watch. I was gonna ask you though, like in terms of like, because you're obviously you're going through therapy. Have you found that your magical practice has like helped you process? Like, is the magical practice what you got you to the point that you felt you could do therapy again? Do you think, or is there like an element to the magical practice that has aided you in healing?
It's yes, but also weirdly the sword stuff I'm doing.
Mm,
I have exceptional mentorship. I really do. In
yeah.
a way that I never have had, period. Um I am in therapy now more or less because my mentor was like, you're going to die, you need to go to therapy. And I
Mm,
was like, oh, okay. Um but the fact that I could even recognize that that was something that was sliding downwards again. I mean, I had some pretty rough. There were some pretty rough patches, about a couple of years ago, where pretty dark, pretty low time that I sort of pulled myself out of somehow through a number of strange coping mechanisms. But whatever, things were riding high again. Things have been kind of low again. But like, I think having the magic but also the sword stuff, which to me are sort of
I was gonna say
together.
they kind of like, just looking at the diagrams, like every time I
They're
see,
together.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it looks like a magical practice. It looks like a
Yeah.
ritual circle or something like that.
Yeah, and you can talk to Ash about that all day long. I'll tell you what, he's about 10 years ahead of me in this.
Okay.
He's you can talk he will go off on magic circles for sure. Um but it is the same, it's this idea of sacred geometry and this idea of wholeness and this idea of balance and cosmic harmony and all of these things that are reflected, in the kind of the medium of swordplay, I guess. It's this sort of Aristotelian Euclidean thing.
Yeah.
Um, so having that groundwork and then how that has translated into and changed my magical practice to be a situation where it's like, it is okay for you to strive for harmony. It is okay for you to want harmony. And that doesn't necessarily have to be, like it was with Catholicism, where it was like all about
You still went for the
high
rules though.
control. Yeah, there's still rules.
There's still a lot of
I
rules.
can't help myself there. I'm sorry. There's
I
still
just
rules.
realized that though, like looking at all the diagrams and like between you and Ash, like the amount
Yeah.
of like scientific approach to like swinging a
Yes.
sword that there is. Like it's
Yep.
still very much grounded in like, give me all the rules. Like you pick like the most complex combat. I feel like
Does
I
that
love it. I
surprise
love
you?
it. No, it doesn't. But like I'm just clicking into that now. It's like, oh, you just you're trading the one rule set for another rule set. But it's really interesting
But
to
it's
me, like the grounding
yeah.
in your body, because you were saying, you live in your head so much. So it's like
Yeah.
you took the rules for your head and you put the rules on your body, and like it's almost in a way giving you that safe space because there is like a rule set like governing
It
your
is,
body
and
now.
it's a universal rule. It's like math, right?
Yeah.
It is the way, it is the song of the universe. It is the music of the spheres. It is like, this is the way that the universe turns. And it is microcosmed down into the way that you move your body around this sort of hypothetical circle.
Yeah.
Um,
Fuck, you're making me want to do rapier now.
Yeah, baby, yeah. Come on out and fight with me. Whoa.
I might.
This
I
is it.
might.
This is my secret sales
As
pitch.
soon as you said secret geometry, I was like, I'm in. Let's go.
100%. But that is what destreza is.
Yeah.
It's this is what we do, and this is how we do this, because it is the song of the universe. This is this is true always. So I don't have to worry about human systems anymore. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to worry about, you know, Jim the priest thinks that gay people are going to hell. The
Yeah.
circle doesn't give a fuck. The circle is, there is true. This is how math works. This is how you inscribe a line on a circle. So you can let go of all of that shame and guilt and shit, and just work on getting yourself into harmony. And that has really impacted my practice. Like I've said before, my practice is really cyclical as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot about like the sort of the patterns of nature and the times of nature. And like spring is the same. Spring doesn't care what's going on in your life. Spring is coming.
Yeah.
You know, like nature is waking up when she wants to wake up. So you can flow with her, and work with her, and kind of, you know, use that energy. You know, you can resist it all you want. You know, you can have opinions about when spring should come. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just sort of more of this. It's like layers of the same, right? It's that
Mm-hmm.
kind of overall idea of just being able to release this sort of obsessive need for human control over ourselves, over the universe, over the world, and just going with what actually is.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, geez, I can't give short answers. What the fuck? This
You
is
know what? I'm
terrible.
vibing with it though. This is so good because I'm very cyclical in the same way that
Hmm.
like as you're saying this, like in my mind, I'm like as above, so below. Like it's the exact same thing. Like
Oh my god,
you've really got like these like layers of systems
yes.
that are
Yeah,
just
it's
like
completely that.
yeah,
It is. It's completely as above, so below. It's very much everything that I do is that,
yeah,
right? It's everything can be zoomed in and zoomed out.
yeah,
Everything, I mean, and it's sympathetic magic is the same, right? Like nature always rhymes with itself, the universe rhymes with itself, and
yeah,
you go with that or not, but it doesn't give a fuck.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's going.
No, that's really cool. I do have to get going soon, but there was one thing that I wanted to touch on was when you're talking about liminality. So one thing that I've realized lately, and we sort of talked about this, is like I'm basically the embodiment of liminality at this point in my life. Like I swung really hard to the masculine from the feminine, and now I'm kind of coming back to center. Um, in my life, like I can't really vibe with the quote unquote normies. Like I can't have those conversations
Yeah.
anymore. Like it's very much like if we're not talking about weird shit, I'm like disassociating. Like I'm just off
100%.
elsewhere. And
Totes.
like
Yeah.
it's interesting, like as we're talking, as above so below, like I feel like it's almost like reflecting into my gender expression that like the weirdness of my life is now like that inability to connect with others is sort of almost coming into my gender as well, where that like I have very low tolerance for queer spaces. Like not it's just that like towing the line. Like you have to toe the line all the time. You have to be the most woke. There's no space for like learning and like stuff like
It
that. Like
can
I
be
mean
really hard.
it can
Yeah.
like it depends on the space, obviously. Like if you cultivate that space
Sure.
yourself,
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
different. But like if you're I went to a poetry slam the other night and it was like very Tumblr-esque. We'll use that descriptor.
I
And like
got you. I got you. I
I'm
got you. Yeah.
sure the people on their own, maybe it's a different story, but like in that shared space, it was very clear that there is like one point of view that is to be expressed and like one way of thinking and one just expression, I guess, of self, which is odd because it's like poetry, like it should be a little bit more variable. But the same goes for like any other spaces, like living in Alberta, like I don't vibe in most public spaces in general.
Yeah, feel that.
And like that's what I found is like the deeper I've gotten into this, the deeper that I've become liminal as a person in gender expression, in beliefs, in every aspect of my existence.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've found something similar for yourself, because I have, like, obviously gender expression wise, like I've watched
Sure.
the folk magic like deepen, and then like the gender expression kind of goes a little liminal too, and I'm like, oh, are you going through the same thing here? Like, and I
Yeah,
mean, maybe they're
very
unrelated,
much.
but
No, very much. I think, um, I started down that journey, just before I came back into, just before I started swords and shit like that, right? So this is a little more than a year ago. Um, just sort of like understanding that there was no need to be anything. you know,
yeah,
there's no need, there's no need to rigorously adhere to, something that is fundamentally very arbitrary and very and is really gonna hamper the self
mhm,
in the way that gender does, at least for me. And certainly, like, as I have gone through this year and the folk magic, because like my magical practice has changed, my belief system has changed, more into the sword shit. That has just gotten stronger, that has gotten more powerful, is this feeling of like trying to be a human being first, um trying to be a being in general, first, and then worrying about whatever later, right? Like
yeah,
that I do enjoy that liminality, that sort of Medeo, the in-between space, the like not too
yeah,
much this, not too much that, because it gives you the opportunity and the flexibility to move.
mhm,
Um and like I think you do limit yourself if you pigeonhole yourself in one place or another, because it does restrict your ability to move.
mhm,
um so like that sort of Tumblr like space, I know what you mean. Like, of course, all of these things are very important, and um social justice in general, of course, critically important, everything very, very important.
mhm,
um but there is a classism to those spaces. See, I'm on my
yeah.
bullshit again.
No,
I
but
can't
you're
help it.
100% right.
I'm
Yeah,
on my
there's a
bullshit. There's a classism. There's a classism to those spaces. There is a, because you have to be, like, you have to have enough time and material resources and wealth to like literally study
mhm,
into those spaces. Because if you use a word that's like 3 years old and 3 years ago was the term, and you use it, it's like, oh, well, fuck you, get out then. It's
yeah,
like,
it's like
oh, well, okay,
immediately
I
canceled.
actually work 3 jobs, so I
Yeah,
don't really have time to spend 6 hours a day in the discourse. Like, you're just gonna have to trust me as a queer person that I know what the fuck I'm talking about,
yeah,
because I'm queer.
yeah,
Um, right? Like, there's a big sort of rural urban divide there. There's a big age divide there. There's a big everything divide there. And again, it's that pigeonholing where it's like, to be queer is to exactly be like this.
mhm,
And it's like, yeah, but we're robbing ourselves of a diversity of human experience by not taking the words of this rural sort of, like, rural farm person, who is maybe, never finished high school and is really truly poor, but is queer,
mhm,
who has some.
Thank you for joining us today. Like I said, my phone only had an hour of storage and I didn't realize this, so a fair bit of that conversation was lost, unfortunately. However, I'm hoping to have Allie on again soon, and also to have Allie on with other guests. Allie and I think in the same pattern on various different levels with various different influences. So it's so much fun for me to talk to them because we'll be both kind of saying what we think is different. And then at some point, we kind of realize, oh, we are talking about the same thing. We're just coming at it from different perspectives. And it's really fun to meet someone who can match my sort of cyclical thinking in that way, because I have a hard time conveying it to most people. And if you'd like to reach out to Allie or see what they're up to, you can find them on TikTok at Hearths and History. That's HEARTHS and History. as it's spelled. And you can join them there. Thank you so much for joining.